everyone, welcome to this fantastic interview episode of the Electronic Cafe. Mark and I just spent quite some time with the fabulous Ronan Harris from VNV Nation talking about his new album Construct, which is a fantastic piece of work. He was a charming man, wasn't he, mate?
It's brilliant. I mean, you know, we've been waiting a long time to speak to Ronan. He's a busy man, but it was clear from talking to him that not only is he a great musician, but his passion for the music and the granular detail that he knows about the music,
everything,
his stuff, like the equipment used, the techniques and everything. It's just amazing.
But if you guys haven't heard the new album, me and Mark thoroughly recommend it. We've been fans of his stuff for quite some time. So as Mark says, glad to get him on. Absolute delight for us. So let's just show you our conversation with the fantastic Ronan Harris from VNV Nation.
It's the sounds that I love or things that make me feel a certain way. And then I share that and I hope that people like it.
Yeah.
Obviously, not everyone's going to like something. Doesn't matter. What you make. You can make gold. And I'm not referring to Spandau Ballet in this respect.
Hey everyone, welcome to this fantastic interview episode of the Electronic Cafe. Look, Mark and I have been wanting to get this particular guest onto the Electronic Cafe for quite some time, and we're delighted to say he's here with us now. The fantastic Ronan Harris of VNV Nation. Welcome, my friend, to the EC. It's so brilliant to have you here.
Thank you. I thought you were talking about somebody else. There was somebody else jumping in on the Zoom call for a second. We said, "Oh, but yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure." And I'm sorry it took so long to get to this point that we could do this, and I'm really, really happy.
Mate, look, congrats on album number 12, Construct. I mean, I told you earlier about it. It's sounding absolutely majestic. The soundscapes, I just feel so immersive and huge. Tracks, I mean, Silent Speaks and Frontier, I think are real standouts for me personally. And it's getting fantastic reviews. You must be really pleased.
I'm an oddball in this respect. I make what I like.
Yeah.
I make it primarily for myself. I don't make it with an audience in mind. It's the sounds that I love or things that make me feel a certain way. And then I share that and I hope that people like it.
Yeah.
Obviously, not everyone's going to like something. Doesn't matter. What you make. You can make gold. And I'm not referring to Spandau Ballet in this respect. It doesn't matter. I learned a long time ago, I do what I like and I have fun with it. And I had an incredible time making this album. It was really a labor of love. There was a lot of vintage ended up on it. There was a lot of, I learned an incredible amount. But what I absolutely adore at the end of it, not talking about my experience, is that when you do share an album, the messages you get mostly privately, because a lot of people don't want to post online because they're not so, demonstrative and what have you. And the things that people share, and sometimes it goes down rabbit holes of intellect where people are trying to analyze the depth behind a song or meaning behind a song. It's not just melodies and it's a product. I don't make music for those people. I'm happy that if they buy it and they like it, that's great. There's so much deeper. There's so much depth to what I make. Whether it could be a song like Nothing More, which I know there's people who've heard Illusion and songs like that, and they think, oh, I want another song like that. It's like, well, you don't need another song like that until you are in the position where you need that song. Yeah. And if not, and you want something that's a bit of a banger, then go either listen to Silent Speaks, or as one person told me, they broke the speed limit and got a speeding ticket in California for listening to Close to Heaven. And I thought, well done. Well done. I'm sure I hope it was worth it. I'll pay the fine if you've got video of it. But anyway, the reactions are everything from people who you're making your music for.
From the beginning to the end, our rhapsody. And so when I sing this song, it rhymes in harmony.
So Ronan, for people that don't know, Constructor's just come out. I mean, I mirror Andy's words. I mean, it sounds fantastic. I mean, the opening track, the hymn track, is just kind of, it's got, I don't know. I listened to it and it just blew me away. Which I assume was it a real choir, or was it?
I got asked that. It became my joke piece because I would play to people like, oh yeah, you know, the album starts off with something very modest, and I didn't want to go boisterous on this. I wanted something modest and down key for the intro of the album. And then I'd play them that, and I try to play it as loud as possible. And they're just sat there looking at me going like, is this your definition of sort of like low key? I got asked by somebody I have a lot of composer friends who work in film music, or they work in orchestral music and what have you. With the exception of a number of places in it where there are obvious artifacts, they were very hard pushed to tell that it was made with, you know, tools. I got asked by the head of the vice president of my publishing company, who listens, he's a muso, he listens to a ton of music, and he said, is that an 80 voice choir, or, you know, how many voices did you use for that? I said, well, there's a male choir and there's a female choir and a bit of an orchestra and stuff. And he said, it's just like, where did you record that? And I went, well, in my studio. And he's like, what? Well, how? And I said, well, that's the beauty of tools. The technology has moved to a point where I hear a sound in my head and I want to get that out. And maybe what I get out is just a mimicry, or it's a facsimile of what I want to create. But that was the longest amount of time I've spent on a track, because the programming for it was never good enough for me.
Yeah.
To get every intonation. I mean, the reason it took me a long time is because I'm not a professional music composer in the sense of people who are doing soundtracks or mock-ups for movies and what have you. And that's their lifeblood, and that's all they do all day. So I have to divide my talents between knowing how to do that kind of stuff and then do something like Silent Speaks. And there's so many different categories of music within it. During the pandemic, I spent a lot of time learning advanced composition, chords, all kinds of like fun transitions, counterpoint, and what have you, all these kind of composition terms, in order to help me communicate better with the composers I work with for the orchestral versions of what I do. I just sat down one day at a piano and just started playing that. You get in the mode, and then from there it became this orchestral piece, and the tools got better, and I started to learn how to use the tools better to do what I wanted to do. A lot of YouTube videos, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. You got a sound in your head. You just what you end up with in the recording is the manifestation of, I'm trying really hard to get it to sound the way I hear in my head. Him was epic. I mean, I just sat back in awe at what I'd done, and not in a vain sense, more like absolutely floored that I'd managed this.
When I first listened to it, I couldn't tell the difference between, it was so perfectly done. So I really thought it was a proper 80-piece choir, because, you know, I've used samples, I've used software and stuff, and I know what you mean. Unless you play the sample, whatever, in the style of that instrument or that voice, it doesn't necessarily sound authentic. Whereas that sounded like I really didn't know. So just the geek in me just wanted to ask the question, whether that was a real choir or
it's not a real choir. I wrote it with the idea that if I ever perform it live, there is a possibility of that, because I've wanted to introduce choral pieces into the orchestral side of what I do, that I would be able to play that. I wrote lyrics for it. And if you've worked with samples, you've worked with libraries, you know there's this product called Word Builder, which is part of a lot of orchestral libraries when you use choirs, where you can type in the words you want it to say. Yeah. And there is a language to that, and you have to write things in a very funny way. Like you're not writing English, because it's intended for the sounds and the vowel movements and the how the consonants slide. I'd need to pay somebody for about, I don't know, 7 days to work nonstop on writing that, to get it to sing what I wanted to say. It could be anything. Could be like We're Going to the Shops, or something epic, but the lyrics are absolute banal. I found the right tools, and the good thing is, knowing a lot of composers, I see the tools they use. I help them with synth programming. I help a lot of them with creating soundscapes using the libraries that I use. So a lot of it rubbed off on me, how they approach what they do as far as composition. I wanted it to be as authentic as possible. I sent a demo of it to when it was still not a prototype, but it still had choir and had orchestra and what have you. But for me as a geek in music, I sent this off to composers and or to a composer friend of mine, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he's like, "Well, there's a chord change there that I never would have expected you would have done, because people assume that modern music, pop music, so to speak, or any kind of like pop music since the 50s has a certain kind of approach towards chord structure." I mean, I was getting really nice compliments from people, and I said, well, that's just one track. I still have a lot to go. So I kind of set it as a standard for myself that if I did that, everything else would have to follow. That this would have to be, you write the first chapter of a book and it's, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The rest of the book had better be as good. So I set a standard for myself, and I wanted all the other demos and all the other tracks to kind of match up and it to tell a kind of a story.
For those that don't know, Constructor's just come out, and you've got Destruct that comes out not long after it. I mean, it's a two-parter. Was it a conscious decision to make it a two-parter rather than a double album? Or
Well, originally it was a double album. Right. They started to develop in an album production just develops of its own speed. It becomes what it becomes. You can't affect it. If anybody says, I want it to sound like this, and this, I think that's a fool's errand, because it is harder to make something sound like what you intend than to, say, create something and let it kind of evolve on its own. So the albums kind of diverged from one another. And I kind of thought this would be the weirdest album if you had one album is this harmonious, nice synthy sort of stuff and nice big production and whatever. And then the other album is a completely alien album that they're both so different than one another, you can't tell it's the same artist. I just like so many different styles of music that they always end up somehow on an album. There's this big diversity of the sound. Yeah. It all kind of gels together. I thought this would not they would not work well together. Plus they were growing to a point where the production would have probably taken another 3 to 6 months if I'd wanted to have both in a double album as I'd originally planned. So I thought, no, it actually makes more sense to split this up and have them as two separate bodies. I think a lot of people are reading based upon the genre of music they like into the terms of what the Destruct as a title for an album. People started asking, is it a remix album? It's not a remix album. Is it more like 150 BPM EBM stuff? This is like the harder electronic stuff that's just stupid childish samples and monotonous kind of GABA bass drums kind of thing. And they were like, oh, is it going to be like that? And I'm like, actually, no. It's cinematic, it's darker, it is a lot more intense, it's a lot more rhythmic, but it's an antithesis, because I don't know if you read anything about what I meant with Construct. It's a personal album. Yeah. It's meant to be the development of a persona. And it's all, I took inspiration for it. And I had this idea years ago, before I did Electric Sun, by the way. And the problem I had with calling an album Construct Destruct was that there were things happening in the world at the time. And I thought, unfortunately, the way the internet goes and the way people's attention spans have become, they associate whatever's happening today with, is the album about such and such, something that happened today or something that happened last week. And you go, no, I kind of started on this a year ago. I'm not a fortune teller. People tend to connect things directly to whatever's happening around them, which I think is unfortunate, but I didn't want to be connected with world events. So I opted for Electric Sun, which was a far better idea, I think. And it worked out, because then Construct had time to develop into what it is. They are two halves of a persona. They're the events of my life, other lives, the most important people the people who've had the greatest impact on me, because it's all filtering through me. And I kind of wanted to track an evolution of, this is the point in time where I am now. So what has brought me here? And there are references to older VNV songs in Construct, as there are references to older VNV in songs on Destruct. This is kind of like a gauge of where I am, where I'm at, and what's coming next. Because the Destruct kind of shows that there are many definitions of the title, or many ways to interpret the title, but it's also about like, okay, we have to end this chapter. And we have to move on to something else, and we have to broaden things, and we have to expand, and that's what I love doing. Yep. I kind of alluded to that with Construct, because when you have to go easy on people, you can't just make an album that sounds like the Grateful Dead, for example, and suddenly you bring out, having brought out all these albums like Electric Sun, Noire, and Automatic, and what have you, and to go off and just do something completely alien, that would be unfair to people who really get a value out of your music. I'm not saying that I'm going to go make an album that sounds like the Grateful Dead, by the way. No way. For me, this was like a closing of an era. And not an era as in I'm not going to go off and start making skiffle or playing banjo or something like that. I just want to move off into other areas and just have fun, but it's still going to be uniquely VNV. That was the thing about the 70s. Everyone's album, every consequential album or subsequential album sounded different than what had gone before. And people felt motivated to do that. They were always looking for a new sound. There are times when I make such a massive amount of, I've written an insane amount of songs that I've never used because melodically, tonally, stylistically, they don't fit with what I'm doing with VNV. And I'd really like to explore those and try to figure out a way to have them fit into the VNV sound or my mental ethos. There's an irony in it, and I've always been a duality, and I didn't have a problem with that. I kind of thought that this is there's no issue for me in that respect of being. I don't know. I'm not saying schizophrenic, but every person is two wolves. I've said this in a number of interviews, and how you feed them. I've watched people grow up with VNV songs, and saying that this gave them something, or became their the identifier, the kind of like the self-affirmation when they were, say, 18 or 17 or something like that. And as they've grown, the stages of their life have kind of somehow the music is still integrated with their lives and reflected it. And I thought, that is kind of weird because we are all on this wonderful little journey. God, I sound like Russell Brand saying that. I need a hell of a lot more hair for that. I started messaging with someone who was saying how a song had helped him find himself. I mean, this isn't a therapy organization. This isn't something where we all wear name badges and go, hi, my name's John and blah, blah, blah. It's my evolution in music taste. It's not about personal things. Some of it is about like facing adversity and overcoming, which is just a general rule of life. That is an obvious truth for all of us, that the merit of ourselves is how we face things. Every person starts to get to learn that as they get older. And this has been my demons, my victories, my I got to try again, not failures. And put to a musical soundtrack.
Look, you've been touring the album just recently. Are there any other dates planned this year other than Germany? Because I'd love to see you again.
There are plans afoot for many, many other little runs, but this year I want to get Destruct out. Yep. There's a box set to follow, which is going to be something else as well, because that's combining both albums. and also adding a lot of unreleased tracks and a live album or live recordings of tracks we took on the tour. We went back and listened to all the live recordings and we're like, okay, it's going to be fun editing this.
Yeah, we'll look out for it, mate. I know you can't say too much, but obviously when you're in London, we'll definitely be there.
I saw you last time in Camden, the Electric Ballroom.
Yeah.
TMP.
Yeah, with TMP. Yeah, we're quite good mates with TMP, but yeah, I saw you in Camden. That show was just so intense. It was amazing.
I actually have to say the one in London this time around for me was one of the high points. I can only judge what I see from the stage. I absolutely love the gig on this tour. Something happened doing this tour that the gigs just kind of jumped up onto another level. And I heard that from a lot of people and long-term fans and people who are friends who've been going to the gigs for years. Just something magical going on. Just something nice. We're all together sharing something. And that's kind of what I want with the show. Like the audience is not meant to stand there and just stare at us. I've been to enough gigs like that. I kind of want them to feel that they're a part of this because their energy is what I get, and that makes me do more. Yeah. And I still run around. I pulled a tendon at the first show. That was extremely painful. This time on the tour, first gig, I go out on stage and they've got this horrible carpet or something, this layer on the stage, and I had gripped shoes because you're usually playing on like wood or some kind of shiny surface. And yeah, one thing led to another. And the rest of the tour, I was kind of thinking, right, well, I guess I've got to slow down a bit because this hurts like a mofo. So the thing is, when we got to London, I was like thinking, I'll just stroll around and just sing to people and be able to interact. And there's so many different types of people at the show. I'm just having a blast with them. Faces from the past, new people, all kinds. I just absolutely loved it. So Electric Ballroom, wow. Yeah.
It was absolutely rammed.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
Bigger venues next time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where next, but we were very lucky. We've worked with various promoters in the UK, and I want to, when I say UK, there's a clue in that because we're trying desperately to be able to play Northern Ireland. I've always wanted to, and as well as Scotland, as well as we played Wales. It's very difficult dealing with promoters because you've got to deal with, not difficult that they are difficult, but organizations being able to get you the right gigs in the right places at the right time. So it all kind of, all the gigs can happen after each other. We are continental based. It's very easy for us to logistically do a tour in Europe. That's not a problem at all in mainland Europe. But when it comes to the UK, we had to tie it in with getting 2 dates and then setting up shows around it. So we weren't sitting in Belgium on a bus for a week or something like that. And I don't want to do fly-in shows like we've done before because that limits what we can bring to the stage show. We wanted to bring our tour. That was our intent. It's very difficult when you're bringing in like bigger bands, and we are still a very small organization, regardless of the size of the shows. To bring in heavy equipment, to bring in the LED walls and all of the lighting and everything like that requires months and months of paperwork. I mean, you'd really want a group of about 10 people working for you on the phone all day. If we wanted to go over to the UK with, say, a truck and a tour bus, we would be, people don't realize how much of an effort it has become.
Going right back, what music was you listening to growing up, and what was your kind of like musical epiphany that got you into electronic music and where you are now?
That's a very easy one to answer. My mum would have the radio on in the kitchen. She would watch Top of the Pops while ironing. I think for my mum, that must have been like the way, let's say, a generation had never even seen a smartphone, and then the kids are all using smartphones, and there's this huge break. So my mum had grown up in nothing, absolutely, like in a farmhouse in the center of in the southwest of Ireland. Technology for them was, getting electricity back in the 30s or in the 40s or something like that, as it is for so many people in rural parts. And here she is, you know, end of the 60s, she's having kids, and then she's doing the ironing and watching Top of the Pops. And I just thought, what a culture shock that must have been for, you know, her. Net effect of that was I got to see all these artists perform even at 4 or 5 years old. And it was Hot Butter's Popcorn did it for me.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Irish radio used to use electronic music for all of the link parts between radio shows. It's kind of like Imagine Radio 4. Between the shows when they were talking about what's up and coming, or even the intros to shows, they would have electronic music playing, whether it was Mike Oldfield or whether it was Tangerine Dream or whether it was Vangelis. So growing up in the 70s, I zeroed in on electronics very fast. Didn't know what made the sound. I remember the episode of Tomorrow's World. I actually watched that one where Kraftwerk was interviewed.
I remember that.
Loved Autobahn when it came out. I was probably 7 years old. It was played on the radio the whole time, and it was that beatniky sound, and it was, but you don't know that when you're 7 years old. You have no reference to music, but there was so much variety in music anyway on the TV, and I just get lost in music. So I loved it. I used to be the kind of person who would sweep up and down the shortwave. I go into long wave and shortwave. I was just fascinated by the atmospheric sounds and the distant signals. And I would hear things like Radio Prague. The weirdest thing was when OMD did Radio Prague as a track, which is basically just the opening music, the announcement music that broadcasting is starting, something that people today would not understand. I used to hear this and wonder, what is this? And you'd hear these distant voices and you'd get to hear music from all over. But I loved recording the weird noises. And we had a piano at home because my parents thought one of us is going to become a virtuoso. Didn't really work out. But anyway, you know, hope springs eternal and all that. But I would have like one of those tape recorders where you press record and play on it and record weird sounds. And then you could do a trick with it where you could overdub on the same cassette. On one channel would play and the other channel would record. So there wasn't a stereo. It was just ending up as a mono signal. And I was able to do this. And I would just layer up stuff and I would just experiment because I just wanted to do something. I wanted to create. And at the same time, I'm hearing all this electronic music. So yeah, it wasn't until 77, I guess, you know, we went on holidays and I Feel Love came out and that was it. I mean, there were songs before it. I loved Vangelis. It was always used in science shows. It later became the music for Cosmos, obviously. Jean-Michel Jarre, all these kinds of things. But at the same time, I'm listening to the new wave of music, which is coming out from about 77 on. Always been into science. I'd always been into sci-fi, astronomy. So anything that looked like a laboratory, you know, you see a guy standing in front of a wall of synthesizer, like Isao Tamita, or say even Giorgio Moroder. That was it for me. I was like, what do all the knobs do? I saw Giorgio Moroder on Top of the Pops doing From Here to Eternity, I think it was. And he had a Roland System 700 behind him. And that's when it all clicked. He must be able to make all of this with just that.
Devils and angels, lit up by the strokes, moving hypnotized. I caught your reflection in the neon on glass, an electric silhouette against a static sky. It's a beautiful dream, it's a beautiful life. It's just a reflection, a world that must survive. We're children of the past.
So did you then, after hearing all that and being influenced that, what were your first steps in terms of what was your first, or was it guitar? What did you actually do once you had this amazing inspiration, buddy? What steps?
I wanted a synth. Who didn't? And remember, this is the time when the Human League were printing on their albums. No acoustic instruments were used in the making of this recording. You know, there was the J.G. Ballard type 70s, this dystopian 70s, and, you know, movies using all that sound. But for me, I wanted to make something electronic. I felt that electronic sounds were space sounds. These were unimagined. It wasn't about trying to make it sound like a violin. It was about creating sounds that no one had ever heard before. So guitar didn't do it for me. I love the acoustic feel of it, but piano was it for me. That was the thing that my parents got me to do piano lessons. That didn't work out because if there's one thing I know about myself, never force me to do something I enjoy, or never impose strict rules on something I genuinely love, or I will just go into protest mode. So I had a piano teacher who used to stick knitting needles in me if I hit a wrong note. Things that the older generations felt was normal. But that was it. I gave up on that. I went home and just learned how to play melodies myself. And that kind of evolved. And then the first synth was going into, I can't remember what the shop was called in Dublin. I think it was Long and McQuaid. I can't remember if that's the one in Dublin. And they had a Yamaha CS5, which was Martin Gore's first synth. Right. And I didn't know how this thing operated. And the guy who was showing me, who ran the keyboard department, he was from the same town that my mum was from, which I found out through his accent. And I said, all right. So we had this kind of connection. And he just showed me how the thing worked. And other people would come in and they would use it and they would try it out and think, yeah, do I want this? That's how I learned how to use a synthesizer. I think the first synth I owned was a Yamaha CSO1, the little battery-powered one.
Yeah.
Tiny little thing. Started up, me and my mates in school, we had ideas for a band called Lumière Noire, like black light. Yeah, that never happened. Everything was like notebooks and copybooks and designing your logo and your outfits and your stage and, all those kind of things. Yeah, that was it. I mean, as far as first synths are concerned, I mean, it just evolved over through the 80s. I mean, they were ridiculously expensive. I mean, that's obviously dependent upon what you're earning, but you're working Saturday jobs, you're not buying a synth.
We've all been on that journey. I think I started with a SH101, went into a Korg Poly 800. I had a Juno 6. Then when digital came out, you couldn't give them away, so I got rid of them for next to nothing, much to my disgust.
You're going to get yourself upset again, mate.
Yeah, true, but it's right what you say, Ronan. Like the early synths were very tangible. You literally just played around with them and just kind of got out the sound by finding them yourself. It wasn't like, nowadays you've got it's like a spreadsheet. You just flick through.
I can get into that technologically. I have an Elka Synthex, the remake by Black Corporation. And I use that and I fell in love with it because I was using the plugin and I was thinking, how did I miss this synth? So it was kind of like Elka's version of, in the answer to people bringing out polysynths in the 80s.
Yeah.
You've got your Jupiter 8, you've got your Pro 5 and what have you. But I never actually heard the Elka Synthex until there's an artist called Vitalik who I absolutely adore. And he's using it for modern music, which I loved because there were so many people who were still using synths to make music that sounded like it was made in 1982. It's kind of like all the guys who buy Moog synthesizers and try to go back and sound like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It's like, okay, I don't understand that point, but I suppose it's akin to playing a tennis racket in front of the mirror. I love people evolving with these things because you think about it, your SH101, everyone thought, well, that's it. It's still basically a mono synth, one oscillator synth. It's the same design or same layout as, say, the SH9 or the SH1, possibly without the second envelope generator. Oh, yeah, I am a geek on this. So if we want to get into, if this is for synth lovers, I will geek out with serial numbers and ranges and filter types and circuit board numbers. Believe me, when you don't own a synth, you will read every piece of bump that's available to you and study it and learn it like some goddamn train spotter. Suddenly, Acid House comes out, people don't have a TB303, so they start trying to use a 101, and they create a whole new sound. Got synths that were designed, the layout was the path, the signal path was designed in the 70s for a whole other style of music. And people are coming up with completely crazy new ways of using it. That's what I love.
This feeling is not sadness. This feeling is not joy. I truly understand. understand. Please don't cry now. Please don't go. I want you to stay. I'm begging you, please. Please don't leave here. I don't want you to hate.
So Ronan, you're Irish. You've lived in London. You've moved to Canada. I believe you're in Hamburg now. You live in Germany now.
Yeah.
In your music, do you find that your location or where you're living bleeds into your music? It influences you in any way?
London, probably the most, without a doubt. But that inspired in a different way. So first chance I had to get out of Ireland, I took it. Not that I dislike Ireland, but it was at a time where things were, you didn't have a job without experience. You didn't have experience without a job. And it was really the time of, will the last person leaving Ireland please turn off the lights? That was the joke we all made at the time. I wanted to see the world. My view of the world was very international. The music I liked was all coming from other places. I felt I was on a small island somewhere on the outskirts of, it's like if you grew up in the Norfolk Broads and everything's happening in London, you have this feeling that, Jesus, nothing around here, And I just wanted to get out. I'm half British. My dad's side of the family is all British. Most of them live in Britain. Yeah, we'd have the Yorkshire contingent and the Lancashire contingent over for visits. And I just wanted to get out. I went to London like a lot of my friends had done. I'd been studying computer science, a thing called commercial computer science, which was less about circuit board making and more about how do you build a system together. We're talking the 80s here, right? So we're talking mini computers and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
I was already in that, my world was leading that path. I was already in tech. I was crazy about making machines do things that no one thought about them doing. I got my programming certificate, all that kind of fun stuff, and did all the modules and everything like that. Went off to London, completed my education, and got a job working as a programmer. And the first night I arrived in London, I went straight into Piccadilly Circus, and there was this guy standing at a traffic light, pedestrian crossing, with a flat top, with cycling shorts. I mean, we're talking the 1987, 1988 look here, right? He's got his big chunky shoes with the toe cap cut off, so the metal toe cap shows. He didn't have Grolsch bottle tops in his shoes, thank God. He had the Sisters of Mercy, the pentagram thing, painted on the back of his jacket, flat top. He just looked, this is the look at the time. This was that Nitzareb look. And I should also mention, it's very tragic that we lost Douglas McCarthy yesterday. That's been a while coming. I'm very close with, obviously through all the people I am connected with, they're all working very, very close at Nitzareb, have been for years. And we meet a lot. We talk a lot. We have done. I really like Doug. And yet I had been a fan in the late 80s. I didn't want to tell him I was more of a Front 242 fan, but anyway, it's very sad. But so anyway, we move on. So I went to London, went to the Hard Club. Industrial music was something that kind of had evolved, I guess, in the 80s. No one had given it a name. London was just this playground of different styles of music. Everyone was making their own style of music. Where I recorded Empires, for example, in Hackney, the studio was partially owned by a guy who was making breakbeat, and he was doing loops and creating loops for all these really big artists at the time. And there was such a cross-pollination of so many styles of music. So that's what is the beauty of music. I hate people who become insular, because Kraftwerk even said that, they were listening to James Brown, and that's what kind of inspired. They wanted to do a machine version, a factory version of those kinds of beats. And that in turn creates hip hop beats, like people like Africa Bambaataa and like, Soul Sonic Force. Everybody's taking inspiration from each other, and it's just going backwards and forwards. And that's the beauty of music. So if I listen to the Moody Blues, or if I listen to something from the 60s, if I listen to Silver Apples or anything like that, everything has always played a role in what I was doing. And I found London to be so diverse in people's tastes in music, something I absolutely loved. And I lived in total 87, end of 87, I went there. worked in computing, did all that stuff, went off to Canada for 4 years. It was the rave time in England. I just left that. Things started to change. It was time to move. I went off there, worked contracting, doing jobs. It's kind of where VNV Nation kind of grew into what it is. It was me with a couple of synths in a bedroom, a dodgy mixing desk, my beloved Pt.1. I bought that for next to nothing. Someone was, as you say, giving it away. But in the days of rave, everyone was hearing that all these synths were suddenly back in vogue very few years after. So from the mid 80s, people could buy a Roland System 100M for nothing. You could buy it by the pound from the warehouse. Do you know that?
Didn't know that.
They were selling it off out of a warehouse and people could buy it by the pound. All these synths were defunct. I mean, a modular system was defunct for so many people because it needed to be that big to incorporate all the circuits. People would do a live portable version so you could go to gigs. So you didn't have to bring your, whatever your Moogs 3P, or if you got, if you had a System 50, System 5, you could actually bring these things, transport them to gigs, as Brian Eno did with Virginia Plain. I mean, and that, by the way, is what I meant earlier about the 70s was just this sea of music that in every band, the Human League spoke about this very fondly, that everything from bands like Weather Report, bands I'd never heard of. I used to go into record shops with whatever pocket money I had and I'd buy the crappy old albums. But if there was a picture of a synth on it, I had to own it.